Does Mel have an inner monologue, a sort of voice in her head as she goes about her day? So nice not having to work. Although maybe I should call Brandon. Nope, no work. Should I drink more coffee? Maybe go for a hike. No, Mel does not have an inner monologue. At least she was never innerly speaking over the 65 samples, so individual moments of experience that we looked at over the course of 12 interview days. She might at other times be innerly speaking, but we can confidently say that it's not a substantial part of her experience.
When this Mel was telling myself and other Mel about her inner experience, my friend almost fell out of her chair because she was like, how is this possible?
So this was done with the method descriptive experience sampling, and I'll let the founder Russell Hurlburt describe it.
What my goal is to make the task as straightforwardly simple as it can be, which is if I could get inside your head, body, whatever, and experience your experience the way you experience your experience, I would do that.
And in a minute, we'll talk about the nitty-gritty of how we do that. But first, it's important to know that what we find doing this can be so different from what participants expect and can really show that inner experience can be so different person to person.
I just learning through friends or like anyone, my gosh, how they think their inner experience is compared to how I think mine is or whatever is so vastly different. It's like we're all speaking different languages. So like what's that about?
So Mel put it really well. It's like we're all speaking different languages. But it goes even beyond that because Mel's experience at first, I didn't even think was possible. It's like someone speaking a language where you're like, how is that even, like, I don't even hear anything. I don't hear sounds. Like, I don't understand how this could be a language. So we'll get into what Mel's actual experience was. But let me just say that it took me the better part of a year trying to wrap my mind around it, thinking about it all the time in the shower, just trying to understand. I don't get it. I really had to battle my own theories of what I thought inner experience could be. And I've been doing this method for some time, but I was not prepared for what I found delving into Mel's experience. And even her own dad didn't believe her when she described it.
God, my dad would roll his eyes at that. He'd be like, oh, God. Because you remember how I told you, he still thinks I make it up, that there's no voice in my head.
So can we convince Mel's dad? Well, let's first look into what exactly the method is. So DES looks at isolated moments in time. Participants wear a beeper that goes into their ear through an earpiece. And participants wear it as they go about their everyday lives. Maybe they're folding laundry. Maybe they're at a concert. Maybe they're caught by patterns of light and shadow on the bus. And it delivers random beeps throughout the day. So usually about 6 beeps a day. And right after the beep comes, they have to jot down what was in their direct experience right before the beep. So not during the beep, not right after the beep, but right before the beep. So if you're living your life and then the beep comes, then you turn it off. We want what was caught directly by the beep. And then we have long interviews about what their experience was. We repeat this whole process, so wearing the beeper, getting the beeps, the interviews that last an hour over the course of multiple days, because it takes many days to actually build up skill, to know that we're on the same page, to know that we're not talking past each other. So let me talk a bit about how we came together for this project. So there's Russell Hurlburt. He's the founder of descriptive experience sampling. He came up with it sometime in the 70s and has been perfecting it for over 50 years. There's Mel, who found Russ's work, his research on inner monologues, and was fascinated. She's a documentary filmmaker and a producer. Then there's me. So I've been fascinated by Russ's work for a while, since maybe 2017 when I heard about it.
Julian had sent me stuff that he had done, and I'd been critical of it and thought he would go away, but he didn't. And then
We're still here.
And eventually it was kind of the perfect storm. Me, Russ, and Mel were both interested in this thing at the same time. And so we decided to work together on this project, interviewing Mel and making it all public. So like a different way of doing academia where it's not hidden behind paywalls, but everything is available, is public, is shareable. So Russ was my academic idol even before working on this project. He's the person who's most shaped my thinking. So it was really cool being able to work with him. It's like if you're a basketball fan and you get to play with Michael Jordan. But I learned doing this that everything I was doing was basically wrong. It's like Michael Jordan is telling you, yo, kid, you don't even know how to hold a basketball. You have to relearn how to dribble. You have to relearn how to shoot. So I had to basically relearn everything. And that was all in service of trying to wrap my head around and understand Mel's experience. So let's get into it. This is an easier sample. So for 11 days, she's worn the beeper. She gets the random beeps in her daily life. And we have these interviews. And 11th day of that, for a sample, let's go.
Okay, so the first one went off at 5:05 p.m. And I've written, I was mid-moan in response to some pain, a constant throbbing, tightness in my hands and fingers. I was mid-walk and looking at my phone, but the pain within my hands and fingers was the overwhelming experience, and a negative one at that.
Can you describe the area specifically?
I would say there was tightness from honestly wrist and above, so the whole hand, and then like through my like the webbing and my fingers, it felt most intense probably.
So yeah, it's pretty simple. She has pain in her fingers and the webbing between them. She's not innerly speaking, ow, this hurts so fucking much. But she just has the pain. And the interview went on a while longer. She's walking, she's holding her phone, but that's not in her direct experience. Her eyes are pointed at it, she's processing it, she's not falling down, but her direct experience is this pain in her fingers. So Mel had a fair amount of this kind of sensory awareness. You know, in one sample, she was feeling the sun on her legs. In another, she was feeling soreness at the base of her neck. In another, she's feeling like her body is soft and malleable, pushing into the ground. In these samples, there's something clear, there's something that sticks out, and that's not the case for all of Mel's samples. So now we'll get into something very different. It's the second sample from the first day of sampling. And the first day is considered training. We don't include it in the final analysis, but it's important to look at because this shows how participants start confronting their experience and how we interviewers start trying to wrap our heads around it.
Beep number 2, what was in your experience?
If
anything.
So it was at 2:14 p.m. and I was vacuuming my house and all I wrote down was I was vacuuming and I was just completely consumed by that action. Like there was nothing of note in my brain.
Nothing in your brain at all? I'm just mindlessly vacuuming?
Mindlessly vacuuming.
And attending to any particular aspect of the vacuuming? The bodily feeling of it, the seeing of it, the carpet of it, the floor of it, the sound of it? Like
I felt, like a relaxation and a contentment and things like that. But I wasn't noticing any I wouldn't say I had noticed the sound so much or the particular part of the floor or any, I was just the phrase sort of autopilot again feels relevant.
So Mel is just vacuuming and nothing is sticking out. She's not feeling the cold plastic of the handle. Her eye isn't caught by geometric shapes on the carpet. She's not caught by the sound of the vacuum. It's kind of just automatic vacuuming. And we wanted to find out, she talked about feeling relaxation. Now, is that something she felt right at this moment? Or is that more just her way of describing overall it was a relaxing process? Or maybe if we look at the timeline, there was some earlier moment where she directly felt relaxation, but here at this moment right before the beep, she's not feeling it. It's hard to say, and remember, the first day of interviewing is really just practice. So questions we asked are aimed more at the next day. And so let's get to the next day. The next sample is from day 2, and it's the third sample.
So the next one is 10:49. And I wrote, nothing. I said I just closed Instagram on my phone when the beep went off. There was no thought about what the next task was going to be. So I wrote nothing, and I was annoyed at the time because I want more language, but I was trying to not overthink it. And the very obvious way to describe what was my inner experience was nothing.
Okay. I don't think there's no reason to get annoyed. If that's what the experience is. But so in beep number 2, it was not nothing. It was a little bit of something.
Shades. Yeah.
And then here you wrote nothing.
Yeah.
Is this one actually nothing, you think, or
Yeah.
maybe a little minimal something?
No, this one felt like fully nothing. Because in the way of the one before this, which was a bit shades of nothing, there was still processing something. So I feel like my inner experience was still sort of firing. Like I was still, but then by comparison, this beep felt really nothing. And coming back to what I was saying earlier about like the word dormant feeling really nice.
So Mel describes it as nothing, but we have to be careful and go slow because people can mean a lot of different things by nothing. Let's say you're chilling with your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. You're quiet and then you ask, "Hey, what's on your mind?" They say nothing. It could mean, well, maybe they're thinking about their ex and they don't want to tell you. Maybe they're not thinking, but just feeling the sun on their face. Maybe they're staring up at clouds and they don't think these things are important enough to share with you, but it's still not nothing. It's still some kind of experience. So we want to figure out, is Mel really experiencing nothing? And a lot of psychologists argue it's impossible to truly have nothing going on in your mind. At the very least, she has to be visually taking in her phone. Her eyeballs are pointed at it. But that's not necessarily the case. So here's Russ asking a question about that.
So I think it's possible to have your eyeballs aimed at the computer screen, which I gather is a fact of the universe. My eyeballs were aimed at the computer screen.
Mm-hmm.
And do I see the computer screen? Or and by that I mean, do I have any experience of that? Because our sensory aspects can be aimed at something and I don't experience it at all. Or my eyeballs could be aimed at it and I could be seeing the computer screen. So, for example, right now your backside is on the chair, and now that I call your attention to it, you can feel the sensations from that.
Mm-hmm.
But probably you haven't been paying much attention to that for the last 15 minutes because you've been trying to think about something else. You've been processing that information, but entirely outside of your experience, your directly apprehended experience. So my question is about the eyeballs aimed at the computer screen. Is it just my eyeballs are aimed at it and I'm not processing it at all? I'm not experiencing it at all?
Yeah, maybe that sort of feels... Yeah. I think on these occasions, it's turned off.
So you watching this video are probably sitting on a chair or a couch or a bed or whatever, but before Russ's speech or before I call your attention to it, you probably weren't always directly aware of the sensation of the chair on your butt. And the same might go for Mel. She had just closed Instagram, her eyes were open, but was she directly visually taking it in? We're not sure, and we still don't quite know. She says it was probably turned off, but again, this question was more aimed at the next day. But through the final day of sampling, there were many samples with nothing in Mel's experience. So a lot of consciousness scientists are pretty adamant that we can't have nothing in our experience. And one reason could be that if there are moments with nothing in our experience, we're not going to remember it. We're going to remember the parts where something happened, we were innerly speaking, or we felt some sensation. But if there is nothing, it just kind of gets erased from our mental hard drive or whatever. So up through now, we looked at samples that were very autopilot-y. Mel was vacuuming and nothing was really grabbing her attention. And she had lots of samples like that. She could be sending an email or filling in a form and nothing was really standing out. She wasn't having a clear thought. She was just doing the thing, A to B. And there were also lots of samples where nothing was in Mel's experience. To the best of her ability to describe, it was dormant or just turned off. But now let's get to the part where I really had trouble understanding it and really had to reshape my mind to get inside Mel's head.
Next one was at 10:21, and I was out for coffee with a friend at this point. So we were sitting in a cafe, and this was really interesting because this went off mid-conversation, which is what I was really hoping for. So I was mid-conversation and deep listening to Millie. there's no thought, just full attention. So she was speaking, the beep went off. I almost found it challenging to write down what my inner experience was at that point, because it just was locked in.
So full attention. Was that to any specific thing she said, or just more
On this,
general about
on
attention?
this one, I haven't written down specifically what she said at that moment, but I had a singularity of awareness, presence, whatever, in terms of just being consumed by whatever it was she was saying. Again, I haven't written that down, but I remember that when the beep went off, I was absolutely consumed by whatever it was she was saying.
Do you think if you had written down a particular thing, do you think it would give us insight into the experience, or do you think that it wouldn't have mattered the exact content?
No, yeah, it wouldn't have mattered, because without, at risk of adding too much context, that's me all the time. There's a singularity of thought whenever I'm having a conversation with someone. So, like how somebody else might notice flower behind them or think of that other thing they have to do or whatever, like Millie was speaking and I'm listening, and that's my experience at that moment, and it always is. So I don't think the content is relevant here.
Okay, so Mel's talking to her friend Millie. She's locked in, she's absorbing it. But I kind of wanted more detail. I was like, okay, you're so engrossed in the conversation. What's she talking about? I mean, this is something that I would want to know. But I wasn't really getting anything, and Mel wasn't saying that the content was so relevant. So my questions got her generalizing, talking about her experience in general, and we really want to keep it to specific beeps with this method. So let's jump ahead to the fifth beep.
I've got, this went off 7 minutes later. So I've written mid-conversation, same thing. Now, interestingly, this went off as I was talking, but the inner experience felt the same. So I was mid-sentence, couldn't tell you what the sentence was, it didn't feel relevant. It literally interrupted me, and if I reflect on what I was doing, this felt exactly the same as the inverse, as when I'm listening. Like my brain is quiet and I'm just doing the thing.
So it seems her experience isn't of her talking or of her friend talking, but it's of being carried along by the conversation. But then I was still confused why she said what she was talking about wasn't relevant. If she's carried along by it, wouldn't that be relevant? Like, are they talking about boys they're dating? Are they talking about a movie they saw? Are they talking about geopolitics? Like, I would think this would be something she would report if she's so absorbed or locked in or engrossed that she would say what it's about. So this was the first step confusing me. And then the next step that really threw my mind into pretzel mode was this.
Like, now I'm trying to think about whether, like, okay, how does listening to this conversation differ from me doing the vacuuming?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not necessarily sure it does differ.
Okay.
Even though what I'm engaged in is so entirely different. You know, I'm listening to Millie tell me a story. Inner experience wise, I think it's kind of a similar thing of there's nothing that I'm like super aware of. I'm just like wholeheartedly listening.
So next, Mel notices I'm getting confused, and then Russ confronts my confusion and my theories about experience.
You seem more confused than ever, Julian, whereas I feel sort of
less confused.
So
this is the way it is if people are being honest, I think. Because I think what's happening is Mel's being more honest, and Julian is being confronted with his own presuppositions, which confuse him because he wants it to be a meta-awareness kind of a thing, and we're telling him it's not a meta-awareness thing, and then but his presuppositions say, well, it's got to be an American or something. I don't want to put his presuppositions into words too much.
So I try to fight back. It's not a meta-awareness confusion I have. So this is me sometime later trying to phrase the battle I'm going through in my head. I guess I'm most confused because a lot of these samples seem like quite a bit more than nothing, but you still compared them to samples that before we had kind of tied to as like a little bit more than nothing, you know?
Yeah, I think that this whole that conundrum is exactly at the core of my inner experience.
Yeah.
Because I think that sort of paradox is exactly my inner experience. Like, is this deeply nothing and there's nothing going on and you're just on this autopilot? Or is it like this deep absorption in the present moment that's somehow different to that? Like, I don't think they're worlds apart, Julian. I sort of think it's somehow the same thing.
So Mel laid it out pretty well, but it would take me months to actually figure it out. So every day I would just be like trying to wrap my head, like, how is this possible? Like, how come she describes experience where she's deeply absorbed, deeply locked in as the same as experience that seems so autopilot, like she's just vacuuming and barely anything is there. I wanted to say Mel's absorption was content free. Like, she couldn't tell us if Millie was talking about boys or potatoes or volcanoes or whatever. Like, it didn't seem relevant. But then in our long discussions, I came to realize it doesn't make sense to separate Mel from what she's absorbed in, as if she's some separate thing or as if there's some mini Mel inside her head that's separate from the world out there. So I was too focused on the topic of the conversation. I think that's what's important to a conversation, what you're talking about. But to Mel, it was way more than that. It's her friend Millie. It's the whole interaction. And they're deeply in tune with each other without Mel being able to single out, oh, we were talking about this one thing at this moment. So I was so used to academia and its binaries, like these separations between conscious and not conscious, thinking and feeling, content and experience and no content, attention and automatic. I thought these things had to be separate, isolatable, concrete, distinct. No. Because that's how academia operates. It's by creating definitions, creating separations and categories, and then imposing these categories onto people to try to describe them. But that's not how people work. That's not how our minds work. We don't necessarily have these separations. And it's only by confronting, by looking at individual moments of experience, that you can see what the reality is instead of all these categories we made up to try to describe reality. So after all the samples are collected, there's a part where we go through and try to analyze and try to code different samples. And I kept wanting to create different distinctions, like separate the nothing samples from the autopilot, barely anything samples, from the deeply locked in samples. And here's Mel addressing that.
The levels of nothingness is sort of exactly missing the point. I think it's this not singling anything out, regardless of what it is. For the most part, in all of these samples, that's sort of the case. Just being carried along by whatever it is, movie, conversation, or I'm autopilot, vacuuming, whatever it is, nothing is singled out.
So that's the best we could say about Mel's experience. She's not singling anything out. And this was the case for 43 samples of the 65 samples that we got. She could be absorbed, she could be vacuuming or whatever, but she's not singling anything out. She's not separating anything as the figure as opposed to the ground behind it. She's not Melizing. She's not adding her own interpretation. She's not editorializing. She's not judging. And we could look at other samples that are similar. So sample 8.2, she's watching Saltburn. She wasn't singling anything out. She wasn't especially like looking at the light shine off of the water in the bathtub. She was just carried along by the movie. And we got quite a few samples of her watching Saltburn. And a lot of them, she said, they were the same. Like, She couldn't tell any differences, any experiential differences. Sample 3.2, she was filling in a form to get her New York residence card, but she wasn't particularly paying attention to what that part of the form was. She wasn't thinking, oh, what's my address? She wasn't feeling a tingle of fear run down her spine. She was just simply filling out the form. Sample 11.5.
I was mid-editing on my laptop. I was watching and listening to vision of my grandpa talking. I was really taking it in. Nothing else is in my awareness as I focus on this intently in order to craft the story that I'm telling.
So that was by far the dominant type of Mel's experience. And it really boggled my mind how these things could be similar. How filling out a form where basically nothing's really going on, it's just A to B, she's filling it out, could be similar to editing her grandfather and she's deeply locked into what he's saying. To Mel, there wasn't such a huge difference. And she even joked at times that she was dead inside. So here's Russ responding to that and reframing her experience in the way that he sees it.
What was I doing here? What's this sample? What sort of life am I living? Why was I laying on the ground just doing nothing? It all does come across as a little bit, is she depressed, isn't it? I'm really not. I definitely, even back then, I know I was not. But it reads that way sometimes.
So it never came across to me as depressed.
Yeah,
it came across to me as fairly unusual, not adding anything to your surroundings.
Mm.
And I think there might be something that's quite highly skillful about that. I mean, I don't. It's not my job to make a judgment about that, but I think the meditators, people who take meditation seriously, meditation is sometimes called like a clear lake. I want my lake to reflect what's around, rather than a wavy lake where I see my own waves, kind of a deal. And your lake is pretty clear. I'm not trying to say that I think you are evolved to some higher level, because that is not my job. I'm trying to counter the opposite of that.
The dead inside bit.
Right.
So I like this metaphor of a clear lake. It's reflecting the world around it. It doesn't have its own ripples and waves. And we can think about Mel's conversation with Millie. It's not like she's caught up in her own thoughts. She's not waiting for her turn to say, oh, that reminds me of some time when blah, blah, blah. She's just carried along by the conversation. So I started this video talking about inner monologues. And no, Mel definitely does not have a constant inner monologue. And she might not even have an inner monologue at all. As I said, we only looked at 65 samples, but in none of them was there inner speaking. And you can look at a past video I did about Carrie, who sometimes was innerly speaking, and she had a clear voice in her head. Like at one point she was doing graphic design edits and she was saying, we've maxed out our edits on this one, like something you might say to an annoying client. And Mel didn't have that. She sometimes, in a few samples, had words in her head that were not innerly spoken. So for example, in sample 5.2, she's imagining having a conversation with Maddie Healy, the singer from the 1975, and she's saying, I love the performance art and cultural commentary you're doing at the moment. But there wasn't any actual inner speaking. There wasn't any actual voice, any auditory voice that she could hear, unlike Carrie, unlike many DES participants who do have inner speaking. So I might have to make another video about words being present without inner speaking, because I can hear psychologists saying, oh, that's not possible. But basically, as I've tried to say in this video, until you actually look at individual moments, you don't know what's possible or not. Because reality, because people's experience doesn't give a shit about your theories, and you have to constantly break them apart. So the takeaway isn't that Mel is so different or so unique. Every time I do this, I learn something new, I come away with something new. And the point is that we don't even know our own experience until we really examine it, until we look at it moment by moment. There's so much about ourselves that we don't even know. If you've stuck around this long, that's some dedication. You can also click the link below to go to our website with Russ, where we upload the full transcripts and commentary on them. And then we have the full interviews. So our goal is to make this process open and fully accessible. I also want to make more videos. I'm running out of time to do this. I have to get another job soon, and these videos take a lot of time. So I've decided to make a GoFundMe or Kickstarter. I'll put the link below. But if I can raise 1,500, then I can promise you 2 more videos. I don't know the exact topics yet. I wanted to do another one about Carrie's inner seeings and about how they break presuppositions of what visual space has to be. And I also wanted to make a full video on DES findings about bulimia, because those can be really counter to what people expect. But there are so many interesting topics to cover, like DES results of schizophrenia, depression, or anxiety. So if you can chip in, that would be amazing. If you're just along for the ride and are fascinated by inner experience and what's going on in our minds, well, you're in good company.